So welcome to On the Park Bench, a public square conversation brought to you by the Congress for the New Urbanism. On the Park Bench presents interactive conversations with thought leaders in new urbanism and allied industries, providing an opportunity for the audience to engage in real time. The webinar series is a platform for CNU members to engage, debate, and collaborate on pressing issues of the day. Today, we're going to talk about Freeway Fighters, pushing back against freeway expansions with Dorothy Wiley, Mark Nowatarski, Dennis Grzinski, and Kim Mitchell, and the interviewer, myself, Rob Studeville. Share your thoughts on hashtag on the park bench, www.tinyurl.com/OTPB and register for the coming webinar, which is taking place Tuesday, August 2nd, as always at 12 noon, with author M. Nolan Gray, who will discuss his book, Arbitrary Lines, How Zoning Broke the American City and How to Fix It. Urban designer and code expert Mary Madden will be the interviewer. Go to cnu.org/resources/ontheparkbench for more information and to register. Like the webinar last week, this On the Park Bench is based on the Freeway Fighters Coalition, which brings together more than 70 campaigns from around the US, where citizens are fighting freeway expansions or looking to eliminate or cap over existing in-city freeways, often replacing them with something better like a boulevard or a street grid. CNU helped to found the coalition this past spring. You can go to Freeway Fighters, freeway-fighters.org to find out more. This week, we're going to hear from folks and campaigns in Shreveport, Louisiana, Southern Indiana, and Milwaukee. Joining us today, again, are Dorothy Wiley, and she is president of Allendale Strong, a group in the Allendale neighborhood of Shreveport that is opposing the proposed Interstate 49 that is planned through the heart of their neighborhood. Mark Nowatarski is a retired business strategist, current member of CNU, and an advocate for climate mitigation and protecting people's land, homes, and farms. He's based in Jasper, Indiana. And Dennis Grzinski is an attorney in Milwaukee focusing on public interest law and environmental justice. Transportation issues have long been part of his practice. He's legal chair of the Wisconsin chapter of the Sierra Club. And Kim Mitchell is a planner and architect in Shreveport. I'm Rob Studeville, editor of CNU's Public Square. First, the panelists are going to present, followed by a discussion among the panel, and then Q&A from the audience. So please use the Q&A function of Zoom to ask your questions as they occur to you. And now I am going to pass this along to Dorothy. And unmute.
There we go. You can go ahead and talk.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here to share today what's going on in Shreveport with the I-49 Intercity Connector. Today we're going to present some slides. First slide is an aerial view of Allendale and Shreveport. It's 30 blocks. 50 new homes were built and 2 friendship houses. This is where I live after Hurricane Katrina pushed me and my family here in 2005. Before Interstate 20, the population was 20,000, and now in 2022, it is 5,000. Next. Before 2002, Allendale was dilapidated, full of drugs, and the #1 neighborhood for crime. Ms. Rosie, who is a 50-year-plus resident, said, if you lived in Allendale, you were considered less than human, and that was the manner in which one was treated. After 2006, 50 homes were built from people all across the country for Hurricane Katrina evacuees and first-time homebuyers in Shreveport. Next. In the early 1980s, this zombie freeway was put to rest. Now it has been resurrected by our MPO, who proposed 4 routes for 3.5 miles of the I-49 inner city connector to run over our neighborhood, including churches, businesses, and recreational areas. Here's a core group of Allendale residents that came together after the Zombie Freeway so that we can improve our knowledge about what these cut-through freeways do to our neighborhood. We are a learning and doing community for alternatives to inner city freeways. We are for smart investing. Our position has always been separating local traffic from through traffic. And we would do that by building a business boulevard for local traffic and using the existing loop, which connects I-49 South, I-49 North, and renaming that loop I-49. Next. The cost.
You just jumped to that.
Okay, here are some outcomes that we have achieved and are still seeking, featured on our magazine in Shreveport, The Forum. This is Miss Rosie, who shared her story along with other residents about support alternate plans of the I-49 inner city connector. And we've also had a Highways to Boulevard charrette that was done in Shreveport. And we've also joined a statewide coalition called the Four Corners. And those 5 cities that are represented include Shreveport, Monroe, Lafayette, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. And we meet every month for mutual support and influence state and local urban transportation policies and practices reform. We are also part of a nationwide coalition, Freeway Fighters, that is convened by the Congress for New Urbanism. We've been meeting for 10 years. We've had a march and rally on the courthouse steps. We now have a cooperative agreement with the city of Shreveport and with Shreveport Public Assembly and Recreation to save Swepco Park. We've also started a corner store co-op, next, with a food initiative seed grant, which is also part of our national support network. Next. You can find more out about Allendale Strong on our Loop It 49 page. We also have our Friends of Allendale Strong Facebook page, which we currently have over 5,000 followers. Next. We also have a website, allendalestrong.org. We have podcast series, and our first annual report for 2021 is available on our website as well. In April of 2021, we requested NLCOG for their travel demand modeling technical files that were used to justify NLCOG highway plans. And after 9 months of delay with excuses and attempts to oppose unreasonable requirements, NLCOG finally decided to provide us with that link. And our consultant, Smart Mobility, exposed flaws and inaccuracies upon which our Louisiana decision makers have long relied on to create a $30 billion backlog of unfunded highway maintenance and a new mega project. Next. So during September of last year, Allendale Strong and Community Renewal International, they co-hosted a book tour for a visit and a presentation by Chuck Marone, who is the author and founder of Strong Towns. And in his book, chapter 8, you got to read it, Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, is about Allendale Strong's efforts and Chuck's analysis of NLCOG's I-49 Inner City Connector misinformation campaign. We are thankful for this network and for other networks who are supporting us and have given us that support and for the work that is still going on. We are very humble and we thank you that we have benefited from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Sorry about that. I think I'm all set now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Nowatarski, and like Rob said, I'm from Jasper, Indiana, which is a southern area of Indiana. And I'm not going to say that we have a unique situation here, but it is different than a lot of freeway expansion or freeway fighter projects that you've seen that are through cities, because we're a very rural area. We're very farm oriented, lots of forest area here. So that's just a little bit of background. The project that we are fighting, that the Coalition Against the Mid-States Corridor is fighting is called the Mid-States Corridor. What I'd like to do is give you a little bit of what the project is about and how the process took place, how we formed the coalition, a little bit about our opposition efforts, and then where we're at today with their release of the Tier 1 study and what our next steps are that we're trying to do. So the Mid-States Corridor project is a proposed highway to connect I-64, which is down here on the map, up to I-69 here. And what it will do is bypass the town Huntingburg, Jasper, and Lagodi as primary routes there. And the interesting thing about this is since 1980, there have been 5 other studies that have taken place with proposed routes or bypasses around the towns. And every single one of them have concluded not to go forward because of either economic or environmental reasons or both. So what's happened is the latest effort, after it failed, a few of the wealthy business owners that are down in this area, along with their political allies, worked on a process, and let me go forward. We call it the flawed process. But what it is back in 2017, the General Assembly and the governor of Indiana signed the Indiana Senate Bill 128. And what this did was allow formation of an RDA to be able to raise public and private funds for a tiered study. And what it also did by doing that is there was no general public input that would be part of this process. So the photo that you see there is Governor Holcomb signing the Senate bill along with Senator Mesmer, who happens to be a business owner in Jasper. And at the time, Representative Mike Braun, who is a large business owner in Jasper. He was a representative and now is a US Senator, along with the business leaders advocating for the project. So the gentleman, for example, standing right behind Governor Holcomb is Hank Mankey of OFS, and he's kind of the primary driver behind this process. So a little bit about what happened in terms of a timeline. In 2018, once the bill was signed in 2017, 2018, the RDA was appointed, which allowed them to go out and raise $7.5 million in funds from the private sector and the public sector. Public sector being the county government and the various city governments that allowed that allowed them to raise the money for the funds. And then they came back in 2020, since they started the study. In 2020, they came and gave various public presentations. And when these public presentations were held, the public thought they would have the opportunity to give input, and it really wasn't. It was a public presentation just to tell the public what is going on here. And they tried to give us a survey to say, we're studying 5 routes. Please tell us which one you prefer. And they did not allow us to put any no build, input into it. So a lot of people that attended, and we had hundreds of people that attended, just either didn't fill them out or put on no, they wrote in themselves no build. So at that same time, that's when our grassroots group, the Coalition Against the Mid-States Corridor, formed. And what has happened since then, we started out with just a small group of citizens, really. And within a short time, maybe about a month after forming, we got hooked up with a couple of key organizations, the Hoosier Environmental Council and the Indiana Forest Alliance. And these are big groups here in Indiana that protect our environment and protect our forests. And like I said earlier, this proposed route would go through parts of the Hoosier National Forest, and it would create a lot of environmental issues. So once they came on board, we started gaining a lot of power. The Sierra Club of Indiana came on board, the Indiana Karst Conservancy, and other organizations. And that really helped us from the standpoint of they had representation at the State House and up in Indianapolis, and they were able to focus on meetings with NDOT, study groups, different legislators. Unfortunately, they would always get relegated to, the junior people, and not really the people that are in charge of NDOT and places like that. So we continued our fight from 2020 to 2022 here. Just a little bit of what we have done. We've held 2 courthouse rallies, very successful rallies. We've had solicited petitions. We had over 8,000. Now Jasper's a town of 6,000, or I'm sorry, 14,000. Our county is 42,000, and we have solicited over 8,000 signatures and petition against it. We've held 4 town hall meetings in strategic locations that would be affected by this route, and we've developed a website and a Facebook page. I'll tell a little bit more about that here in a second. So where we're at today is the study group and NDOT announced the results of the Tier 1 study with a recommendation of the preferred route being Route P, which you see is the one in red on the map. Again, that includes a bypass around Jasper, Huntingburg, and Lagodi. They've held 2 public comment sessions where we were able to give the 2-minute type of talk about why we oppose of this, and then written comments were all due by June 14th, and the next step is that they will take in all of those comments and supposedly announce their final EIS decision in early 2023. The one thing we did was we really focused a lot of effort on the written comments with that period. We had, during the town hall meetings, we had several people that said, hey, we need help with written comments. So we set up 2 workshops to do written comments, and we shared tips on writing comments, and we actually had a committee of about 8 of us that developed several different letters covering 10 different topic areas. And those turned out to be very successful. I know for a fact that hundreds and hundreds of letters were were sent in with comments. So our next steps, even though they've announced the preferred route and stuff, and we put in our comments, we're not stopping. We're developing a postcard campaign to send to local commissioners and the council and the political groups. We're looking at supporting candidates in the next election that are opposed to the highway. And we're looking into an ad campaign to really expose those that are in office or running for office that support the efforts. Also, we want to stop the efforts for any tier 2 funding that takes place. So we're trying to set our plan, our strategy for that. And we're going to continue to engage with the media. We've had a great media presence and support. And we want to continue that engagement because it really opens up the visibility there. So, and then finally, unique situation is we really want to seek a support from a highway engineer or planner that could help us with, identifying. We tried to come up with alternatives and everything. And in talking with other freeway fighter organizations, it seems like they have been able to engage with planners and engineers and stuff. And we don't have that. So that's what we're in the process of looking for right now. And that's about all I have. We have like I said, we have the Mid-States Corridor Facebook page, which is not very active. We don't have someone that's just constantly working on that. But we have a very active Facebook page on Stop the Mid-States Corridor Project. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Stop sharing. I can share Dennis's presentation.
Good afternoon. I'll be presenting some information on the history of pushing back against freeway expansion in Milwaukee. Next slide, please. As happened in many cities around the country, when the interstate highways came to Milwaukee, they disproportionately destroyed and divided Black and Latinx neighborhoods, removed thousands of homes and businesses, encouraged urban sprawl, and hollowed out the city. In recent decades, Wisconsin has devoted multiple billions of dollars for rebuilding and expanding the interstate highways and other major highways in and around Milwaukee. And in the same period, transit funding and services have declined. Next slide, please. There are some reasons for hope. Milwaukee was actually able to prevent the construction of several freeways that had been planned through the city back in the last century. And actually around the millennium, around 2000, Milwaukee managed to take down one freeway spur, which has been redeveloped to great success in the last 20 years. More recently, in 2012, the Black Health Coalition of Wisconsin and Milwaukee Inner City Congregations Allied for Hope challenged the $1.5 billion interchange project, the Zoo Interchange project west of Milwaukee. Their lawsuit, the settlement of that lawsuit resulted in about $14 million of funding for bus routes that ended up connecting Milwaukee's north side African-American neighborhoods with jobs in several suburbs in Waukesha County to the west. More recently, in 2016, spending $1 billion to expand 3.5 miles of I-94 between that western interchange and an interchange in downtown Milwaukee was approved. That approval was challenged by MICA, by the NAACP and the Sierra Club in federal court. When it came time in 2017 to defend that decision in court. No, one slide back. Governor Walker, instead of presenting information to defend the decision, he asked the federal agencies to withdraw and vacate the decision. Great victory for the clients. No need for a court decision. Forward one slide, please. There we are. The coalition that opposed the I-94 expansion back in the lead up to the approval and in 2016 and 2017 has continued in existence and actually has grown. That project that quote unquote died several years ago was revived by our new governor in 2020. Beginning of 2021, the coalition wrote Secretary Buttigieg, US DOT, about their concerns that WIS DOT was going to use its old outdated 2016 environmental impact statement and sort of rubber stamp it as it decided what to do in the current years. Shortly after that letter went to Washington, DC, we had about an hour-and-a-half Zoom session between coalition members and the acting director of the Federal Highway Administration. About a week after that, WIS DOT announced that it would prepare an updated EIS. The first major victory of the current era, the current project. The coalition has been able to engage transportation experts to assist in preparing and presenting an alternative. We call it Fix at 6, a plan that would rebuild the highway without adding lanes or expanding the highway's footprint, and would instead invest a significant amount of the funds in bus rapid transit lines to provide other ways of traveling east and west in the area. Next slide, please. Here's a WIS DOT design of the stadium interchange at the middle of that 3.5-mile corridor. It's where the Brewers Stadium sits. The interstate runs east-west. Highway 175, relatively short freeway stubs to the south, sort of to the left and top corner of the picture, and to the right and down towards the north. That interchange would gobble up about 40, at least 40, maybe 45 acres of city for more dead concrete and asphalt. Next slide, please. The Fix at 6 report, again, proposing to rebuild without adding travel lanes, without dramatically enlarging the footprint, bringing those freeway spurs to the north and south down into boulevards, which is what the city and the county of Milwaukee both prefer, and spending, again, some of the money constructing 3 rapid transit lines, and someday when we're much older, given our current world, eventually an east-west commuter rail line. Next slide, please. There are additional reasons for hope. Currently, actually fairly recently, WIS DOT has begun considering a 6-lane alternative to the 8-lane mega project that it has wanted since about 2012. The last go around, it had rejected a 6-lane approach as failing to satisfy the project's purpose and need. We'll see what they do moving forward, but that door to a 6-lane is at least open. More recently, just a few months ago, WIS DOT agreed to fund a study of the feasibility of converting the North Freeway spur at that stadium interchange into a boulevard, as the city and county have long requested. And as if by a miracle, shortly thereafter, the Milwaukee Brewers baseball team asked for a similar approach to be looked at for the South Freeway spur, which is right there adjacent to their stadium. About the same time, WIS DOT, in its most recent newsletter on the project, announced that it was considering a diverging diamond interchange, which we've been urging for years, as an alternative to the monstrous triple decker, I don't know what you call it, that I showed you the design of. The downside at the moment is that the suggested diverging diamond that they would like to put there is almost as large in scale as their original interchange design. So a door to a better interchange has been opened, and moving forward, we're going to need to keep pushing. Next slide, please. Why has the coalition had some success and has some hope for the future? One, it's a really broad coalition. There's a diversity of interests, but a united position on the goals. Coalition includes civil rights, minority organizations, environmental, faith-based, health, neighborhood organizations, land use organizations, and transit advocates. You know, they all come from different perspectives, but the city they would like to see, the transportation system they would like to see, is all the same. They're all united in supporting Fix at 6, rebuild. Everyone agrees it needs to be rebuilt, but no more lanes, not a significantly larger footprint. What we need is more money for more transit services. A broad range of activities, different groups and people bring their different skills. There's community organizing, advocacy, education, media events, social media, administrative complaints have been filed, objections to our metropolitan planning organization recertification, largely focused on environmental justice on Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, complaints under Title VI, administrative civil rights complaints have been filed against WIS-DOT, which found all sorts of problems with their approach to the civil rights requirements. And then year after year, and now it's, you know, quarterly or so, filing technical and legal comments to WIS-DOT as the project develops, petitioning our elected officials, local, county, statewide, and federal, and seeking assistance from federal agencies. All of this in a very long history of raising and pursuing a whole range of civil rights, environmental justice, and technical challenges to faulty agency decision-making. With that, I thank you, and we'll move on to the panel.
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to start with a general question. We heard from your your campaigns, which have been going on for quite a long time in some cases. CNU has been doing its Freeways Without Futures since 2007. New urbanist efforts have also been going on for longer than that. But it always seemed like those who were building the freeways seemed to have the momentum, the upper hand for the last 6 or 7 decades. Do you all feel that this is changing at all?
Slowly. We've really, in Allendale Strong, we have really run up against the conventional wisdom of a broken process. And there's just so much momentum that it has. Dorothy mentioned we're challenging the technical engineering and economic justification. And as we do that and learn more about it, our challenge is, how do we communicate that to decision makers? Decision makers have been relying on this 50 or 60 or 70 years of modeling that was always wrong. And now it's become cultural for them. It's really a difficult process for change.
Yeah, I agree with Kim, what he says there, but and it is difficult, but I do think that the more awareness that has been getting out there, and through the media, through everything, and really around the past issues because of the practices that have been used. And more of that seems to be exposed now. And I think that's helping change. It's slow change, but I think it's starting to help. I mean, more people are pushing back and questioning, why are we doing this, and want real answers. So.
And also, I'm sorry, I just like to add, because here in Allendale, we are a learning, doing community. And because we have learned about what these cut-through freeways do, the harm that they bring, I believe that more people are listening now, more so than just saying, I'll go along with the big elite people. They're learning along with us what these freeways are doing, whether they live in that neighborhood or not. And I think that's a big thing. A lot of times we do follow our political leaders or our business rep. But again, if you learn what they do, then I think more people will adapt to maybe they're right, this shouldn't be done. And they'll know that, you know what, it is about us and not without us.
I tend to agree. My view is that 20 years ago, opposing highway expansions was not simply an uphill battle, but was trying to climb a vertical cliff, almost impossible. And I think it's still a very uphill struggle against powerful forces, against large money, against entities that have an interest in continuing to build. But for a number of reasons, the climb isn't as steep now. It is possible to make headway. Part of it is newer generations of engineers who've learned from some of the experience. Some of it's the experience of places that have taken down freeways and have found wonderful developments, redevelopments occur, and have found that people are still able to get around without expanded highways. Here in Milwaukee, I've dealt now with 4 directors of our regional planning organization, our MPO, and each of them has been better than the previous one. You know, each of them, now they're much younger than I am. And I think it's both they've gotten younger and I've gotten older, but they've gotten better and better. And there's a greater understanding of the need and role for public transit. I think there's a greater willingness there. And in the planning industry, the planners are much better than the engineers. And then the other reason for hope is that, at least currently, the federal administration is much more favorable to transit, is much more favorable to looking at things other than massive expansion of highways, particularly in urban areas, and much more attentive to the civil rights and environmental justice implications of expanding highways, particularly in urban areas where minorities are usually concentrated in our country. So there's hope.
And Dennis, you mentioned some things that were like sort of positive alternatives. CNU is always focused on not just, in opposition to in-city highways, although there is plenty of reason for that, but also what could be there as an alternative. And I wanted to ask you all about how do you kind of balance being opposed to something with support for something other than a freeway, a positive vision for the future?
It was interesting, and I've talked to Dennis about this, that as we formed our learning community in Allendale, one of the people we reached out to was John Norquist, who was the mayor of Milwaukee, who really led the effort to block one and tear one down. And he told us, don't just be against, you must be for something, for an alternative. And that led us to really the research to see, well, a business boulevard is what we need. We need to slow traffic down. We want to create wealth, and we've got a loop. And so that became a real focus for us. And Congress for New Urbanism was really, you'd already had the freeways without futures and the highways to boulevards movement. And so that was a big part of our early learning was, looking at those other cities. And yet there's an important thing we've discovered in Allendale that really think the nation needs to embrace a little more, is that the planning for freeways does as much harm as the building of them. And Allendale and the Freeway Fighters, when they organized all the dots on the map, you begin to see there are more places like Shreveport where the threat has caused the population loss that Dorothy shared with you and the disinvestment. And that's a much easier thing to heal than having to tear down freeways. And it seems a better place to start because the message is stop expanding freeways. Let's heal those areas because we can get more for our money that way. So Allendale Strong is focused a lot on the acts of healing, and as well as just the resistance or the alternative to a freeway.
So Rob, I think from my perspective, that's an interesting question. And you look at our area, and again, being rural area, and people, we've had, the town of Jasper has done some amazing things, some investments, and is really thriving. And same thing with Huntingburg. And you're doing all this great infrastructure within towns and stuff that are attracting people here and everything. And then, what we have said with the coalition is, we're all behind what we call smart economic growth, sustainable economic growth. And what happens, because we've cited study after study that shows when a highway is put in around and bypasses mid and small sized towns, the type of harm it does to the local businesses, to the small businesses, and then the additional expense that that the cities and the counties have to pick up once a highway is done, continued maintenance and all the other extra police, that type of thing. So it's been we're sitting there saying there are alternatives. We have shared with them that there are existing roads and routes that you can make improvements on and be just as effective. Right now, the study with the Mid-States Corridor, by putting in a more than $1 billion 54-mile highway, is going to save 5 minutes of travel time from Jasper to Indianapolis. And that's what their purpose and need is focused on, is travel time saved. So we're sitting there, and the other side of it is we point out the environmental issues that are going to happen. I mean, everyone looks at our area and says, hey, we got this great manufacturing base, and we do for a small rural community. People ignore the agribusiness, and the agribusiness here is down in southern Indiana, is the second largest agribusiness in the state of Indiana. And this highway will take away, what is it, like 1,800 acres of farmland. So we continue to focus on, hey, there are better ways and less costly ways and less destructive ways to get the end result that everyone is looking for and would be satisfied. That's how we try to stay positive on it.
And I just like to add, Mark, what you're saying, a positive, just like Kim say, a business boulevard. You know what? You got the motor vehicles. They're not excluded from anything. Then you think about the bike lanes, the walkways, the communal green space. So everyone is included. So it's just not only for the vehicles, but it could be a friendly community where everyone is getting something out of that business boulevard.
I'm going to ask a question from the Q&A, and we'll probably go back to some questions that we can that are on my list. But somebody is writing from Provo, Aaron from Provo, Utah, and we're fighting a proposed new freeway interchange and road widening project from I-15 into the center of the city. The road will be widened from 2 to 5 lanes and would take all the homes from some side of the street and flood Provo with even more cars, etc. All the bad things. And what advice would you offer those that are fighting urban road widening, which is essentially the same as freeways, but called something different? Is there, do you see this as part of the same trend, and or would they use some of the same techniques that you're using to fight such a project?
Yeah,
I would say yes. There may be some differences if it's all local money. Some of the federal issues or federal legal remedies aren't available, but it's a similar kind of situation. It's political organizing, it's local advocacy, it's working with the local, the county, the state officials, getting people to understand what they're losing. And 5 lanes are simply going to mean that people are driving through faster, making it far more dangerous for people on either side of what's suddenly they want to New Jerseyfy part of Utah, It's, safety, it's air pollution. It's not going to make it easier or safer for people to visit the businesses downtown. In fact, it's probably going to be the absolute worst, because those businesses are going to find themselves, more or less on a freeway, even if it doesn't look like a freeway. It's going to act like a freeway if you've got all those lanes. People are going to drive like maniacs.
You're dealing with this system that listens through the standards that they adhere to. And so I would encourage early on, start preparing yourself to challenge the technical issues. And since we're a part of this network of Freeway Fighters, the consultant that we're using, Norm Marshall, also works in Austin. Austin is a great example of what the technical information began to reveal. Through that work, they began to realize, well, TxDOT wants to increase 100,000 vehicles per day in the most congested part of the city. It's going to be disastrous. So the research and technical modeling that is new modeling, not the old modeling that the current standards adhere to, but the new modeling showed, well, 80% of that traffic is actually going less than 2 miles. They would really be better off to take the street grid. That's quite an important revelation that needs to be pushed, because we all have learned about induced demand and the build it and you will come mindset of drivers that create this congestion. And so that's important to be armed with that kind of information when you do what one of the options in Austin is. We want to put in a boulevard, get rid of I-35 and force that 20% to use the loop. And so that's, I would just encourage that, because our challenge is we have to change those standards, because this system, it's amazing how deaf they are. And Mark, it was a little funny to Dorothy and I to hear you talk about the 5 routes and same exact playbook that we've had to deal with. And one of our colleagues in our statewide coalition, Amy Stelly, wrote a recent article saying, "I've cracked the code." And that's a little bit of it, just recognizing this pattern behavior that we're all working against. And it's so great that we've gotten now to realize we're not alone in this, and we are part of a growing network. It's really fun, and it's encouraging.
I mean, Dennis mentioned it's still an uphill battle. I mean, they come in with all their resources and all of their experts, and they often have studies, they have traffic studies they do, and they spend millions of dollars on those studies. I mean, you've had to deal with this, obviously. How does a grassroots organization then build a case? If you see that there really needs to be other things that would be better for your community, other alternatives considered, how do you build a case for that when you don't necessarily have the whatever money, $1 million or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a traffic study?
It's David versus Goliath. In Milwaukee, we've had the privilege to work with a former New Jersey transportation official, planner, who, for very modest sums, last go around on the I-94 expansion, put together the first version of Fix at 6. I don't think we had figured out to call it that back then, for maybe it was $10,000. His heart was in the fight, and I know we got much more value than that from his work. And this go around, he updated the Fix at 6 and brought it up to speed for a similar expenditure. And we're looking for his help as we move towards a draft and then final environmental impact statement. In the previous litigation that I've been involved in, we didn't have sort of a dedicated traffic expert, though one of our coalition members, 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin, has had a traffic staff person who was very helpful to the other attorney and I in the zoo interchange case, helped make us smarter than just being lawyers. We learned, and I mean, I've done a case challenging a state highway where once I was, after suing them and getting access to the files, I was able to look at all the data and recognize that they did not actually follow the methodology that they said they were following. They came up with two different numbers. They had statements in their policies, statements in the environmental impact statement that this is what they would do when they have two numbers. That's not what they did. And that was one of a number of reasons that the federal judge in that lawsuit said, this decision is not supported by facts and reasoning. Go back to the drawing board. Even by that time, I had 10 years of doing traffic and highway cases, but I never went to school for traffic. So some of it's getting into the nuts and the minutia. Some of it's finding help.
Rob, I was going to add to that. We started with only relationships, and it was very apparent that all the resources are on the side of the conventional process. All the consultants, all the money, and that as a group of citizens who are not respected because they're not viewed as smart enough to understand the transportation system. It's a real struggle, and we persevered by this idea of learning and doing became an attractive force, and we did finally put together some funding. But it's encouraging now. We had a conversation with EPA, and they are trying to reinvent technical assistance, as though there's somebody waking up and saying, well, this isn't fair. If we got citizens who are trying to be heard, they're doing their homework, we feel like we know more than the transportation experts in some areas. So we probably need to continue that message. We need to get citizens resources. And we've now seen a grant program that'll go directly to neighborhood organizations. So those are hopeful indicators, but we can't not recognize that we need more resources for those citizens who want to learn and shape their community.
I should really, probably some people are viewing this and they're wondering even, how do you begin? How do you build a coalition? How do you get where you have gotten today if they're just beginning out on a process?
You want to tell them around in the bush?
I mean, I could cover a little bit of that. I think I've covered a little bit in the presentation, but again, we started out as just probably a dozen people, residents getting together to say, this is not right. What can we do? Start planning, start recruiting other people. And that's when, again, when we formed the coalition and started with local media. And then, like I said, the word got out and we somehow got connected with the bigger organizations that were also learning about it and wanting to, expose everything that's going to be wrong with it. So it built from there. And once we had those couple of organizations, then other organizations like the Sierra Club and stuff just joined us. And so we get together every month and talk about what more we can do going forward.
Is there like a number of people that must be involved or another organizations before they start taking you seriously?
Wow.
You know what? I would say not necessarily. It's like our voices are not being heard. But again, for us in Allendale, we were only a group of citizens, residents. I don't know anything about transportation, but again, because I live there, I was an advocate for my neighborhood, then, I would just say, I don't know what I'm doing, but God sent people who knew. Here's Kim Mitchell. There are many other, he's an architect and planner, and every time I just get a little tired and frustrated, my ram in the bush comes. It's just like, I don't know what to do, but here we have, when people see that we are promoting something that they want, then I believe that those people come in because we're caring, we're prioritizing things, and that's how the diversity comes in so that, we could start helping each other. It's not just one person's idea, but it's many that come in and just start helping with this. So I just want to say, I am just so thankful and grateful for all the people that have come in. And the thing about it, there are more people on the outside of the neighborhood that have come in to help, with Allendale. And I just like to say, your city is only as strong as your weakest neighborhood. And by all those people coming in and just looking, what do we want? How can we do more of this? good things are emerging out of Allendale, what's going on. So we've gotten into, I mean, we've had attorneys, lawyers, transportation planners. There was Chuck Marone, Smart Mobility. So we had all types of people that were coming in, you know, to promote what we seen. But again, when the transportation, I say, our engineers see, hey, they don't know nothing about this. We're just going to go do what we want to do. But that's not so, even though they didn't want to hear our voice. But as others came in who knew what they were talking about, they start teaching us. And that's what I love about this learning doing community, because we all come together with all our different thoughts and ideas, and we put them together to make it work.
We're at an hour right now, and I wanted to let people know that the video will be posted tomorrow. If we have a few minutes to continue to talk, we can answer a few more questions. Dennis, you go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No.
Well, this probably is a question that is best directed to you anyway. Bruce asks, how much does the discovery process help? Is the threat of discovery as well as the threat of the lawsuit's outcome important?
The kind of lawsuits that are generally available, particularly for federally funded projects, do not, as a general rule, involve discovery, other than the agency needs to, as part of a lawsuit under the environmental impact statement law, ultimately during the lawsuit needs to disclose to the court and to the plaintiffs their entire administrative record, all of their files regarding the project. And there generally are not depositions, there are generally not trials. It's a lawsuit based on paper, based on paper arguments, paper documents. I think there were the equivalent of 500,000 pages of paper that got filed electronically in the zoo interchange case. And my other lawyer colleague and I worked our way through that to see what was there, to see what wasn't there. We had identified our issues, earlier on as the project developed, and we looked for information that either killed our arguments or supported them. And, in part, I think because the agencies are so sure of themselves and maybe so arrogant and so complacent about they know how to do things and they'll do them their way, that they cut corners. They disregard information that is fatal or dramatically undermines their reasoning process and their conclusions. And we were able to convince the federal judge in that zoo interchange case that their air pollution analysis was completely bogus, that the assumptions that they were using were completely divorced from reality, that the environmental impact statement utterly failed to look at the cumulative impact of billion-dollar after billion-dollar after billion-dollar project expanding one segment of the interstate system in and around Milwaukee after another, never really addressed what's the impact of that on how quickly people can get to these richer, whiter, out-of-county suburbs. what's the impact of that on people moving out there, hollowing out the city, taking jobs and population? And you know, we expected that they weren't going to do a better job on the I-94 3.5 mile segment. We never got to see the 500,000 or so pages because instead of providing them to us in the court, they ran away. They said, "Oh, we won't do this project."
We got a question from Ann in Texas that I think some of you may be able to relate to, but the DOT has just presented a preliminary public meetings and presented proposals with preferred options. And the perception among most of the public is that this is a done deal and that, you know, it's you know, how do you like get people to fight if they think, oh, you know, they're doing it, they presented it, it's going to happen. How do you turn that around?
Well, I just want to make a comment about that. I'm just going to say this, just as an advocate for my neighborhood, it's never a done deal. We've been doing this for 10 years, okay? Wonder why the deal has not been done. Well, for one reason is that we continue to fight. We press on. We have a voice now. And, you know, when other people are coming in with you to advocate with you against the same thing, okay, just like smart mobility, what happened? They found out flaws and inaccuracies, and they're always saying that, oh, we're at another stage. No, you're still back at stage one because that needs to go back and be completed. I mean, they're gonna say it's a done deal because they want to wear you out with resistance. But again, like I say, don't allow them to wear you out. This is where I am. For 10 years, when my arms get tired, God sends me an Aaron and a Hur and a ram in the bush to come back and be strong. And the thing about it, you got to know what you've been called to do. Again, like I say, I don't know anything about transportation, but I've learned so much about it. They can't wear me out because there is someone else who always has my back. So don't let them, okay, if it's a done deal for them, it's a done deal. You all go somewhere and sit down and let us continue to do what we need to do.
And you really have to be careful about playing by their rules. That's their rules are the problem. And it's you know, the lessons from David and Goliath is that David changed the rules of engagement. And so that's a bit of the challenge. How do we figure out how to change the rules?
It's a great question, and I agree with everything. And the one thing I always say is you just got to keep fighting like hell to keep the word out. I mean, we get that every day when we go around and talk to people. They're like, well, we can't do anything about it. It's a done deal. And it's like, no, it's not a done deal. And here are the reasons why it's not a done deal. Yes, I agree. The way it's structured, they're making you want to feel like it is a done deal. It is never a done deal. And that's why we say, you know, we unfortunately in our situation had to wait for the draft EIS to come out, which was a 418-page study with 2,246 addendum pages. And we had to go through that and identify every single thing that was a conflict and misinformation and put that in a summary that we can share with people to say, it's not a done deal. Here's why, and here's why we're challenging it still.
How much do your campaigns cost? Like, you know, or is it all volunteer and you get things donated? I mean, people might be interested in that because it sounds like, you know, if there's a lawsuit, if there's a consultant coming in like Smart Mobility, it could cost some money, at least to bring them in. But
Ours, in terms of our grassroots campaign, we've been fortunate. Oh, we don't have a lawsuit or anything that we're doing, so we don't have that expense. But it's been all a lot of volunteerism and a lot of donations. And we're not talking. Our campaigns haven't been thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, but we'll get support, like I said, from the Hoosier Environmental Council, from the Sierra Club. When we're doing things, not only monetary support, but volunteer support from them to help us out with the things I talked about, the town halls, the written comment workshops, the courthouse rallies, those type of things. So, and then we use the media a lot. We use the media, that's free. They love stories about this, and we take as much advantage as we can.
Well, ours has been really all pro bono, but we did attract some philanthropic support and some small donors too that allowed us to engage Norm Marshall, which we worked for a long time to get in that position to do that, but it is amazing when we get, we've had a lot of pro bono legal support. And at one time we had 13, 4 of those local and most of them from across the state. We've had environmental law clinic at Tulane, at Yale, and one in New Hampshire that have offered different levels of support. We'd love to be filing a lawsuit, but we've not gotten our pro bono legal to say that it was time to do it. Got more encouragement out of Dennis and then someone else that NEPA awaits, because they're using the draft EIS excuse for us too, as to why they're even trying to hold, Federal Highways is trying to hold up the civil rights investigation, waiting on a draft EIS, when we know the process is the problem here, folks. That's where the civil rights harm is coming. And so we're now asking for a multi-agency look at that civil rights investigation rather than just Federal Highways.
Okay, well, I think that we can probably call it a day, and I really appreciate all of your participation. It was great to hear from your points of view and what's going on in your campaigns in Shreveport, Indiana, and Milwaukee. And I also wanted to thank everybody who participated and signed in. Once again, have a great day, and thanks so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.